Along a Minnesota country road one early evening, a farmer on his backhoe stumbles upon the body of a young woman in a ditch. With very few leads, the case runs cold as a Midwestern winter's day. Until years later, when out of the blue, a routine drunk driving stop breaks it all open. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 25 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. Northfield, Minnesota is an interesting place, to say the least. Located in Rice County, in the very southern corner of the state, New England settlers founded the city in the 19th century as part of New England's colonization of what they dreamed of calling the Far West. It's a college town today, mostly, and certainly has nothing to do with New England or the Far West. With farms and enormous patches of acreage far as the eye can see, producing for the most part corn and soybean, it is a charming part of the country known for what locals call its unique blend of cows, colleges, and contentment. 40 miles south of the Twin Cities Minnesota is known for, Northfield offers that small-town appeal, but with convenient access to a major metropolitan region. It seems every 40 years or so, throughout the past century, the population in Northfield doubles, with about 22,000 residents calling the town home today. It's November 6th, 2005, about 4:20 p.m. Local Northfield resident Clifton Montaigne phones into 911 with a rather alarming discovery. Clifton and his son-in-law were bumping along in Clifton's backhoe west down 90th Street when they came upon a graphic scene. A backhoe, or bucket loader, as it is sometimes called, is a large industrial machine putting the driver about 10 feet up above the road, giving them a view of things, keep in mind, one cannot see from the lower grade of driving a car. As Clifton and his son-in-law were driving the backhoe from one area of Clifton's farm to another, Clifton slows down about 250 feet in from a country road running adjacent to 90th Street. The area they are looking at is covered with sumac and brush. "What is it?" Clifton says. He stops the backhoe, gets off of it himself, and heads over for a closer look. "Looks like a mannequin," Clifton says as they move toward it. As they stand over the site, however, both soon realize they are staring at the nude body of a young female. When investigators arrive, Clifton brings them to an area not too far away and points out 2 sets of tire tracks he'd found, which, he says, along with the body, were definitely not there the previous day. He would have noticed. He travels the same road many times throughout his day. Identifying the victim of what is clearly a homicide is crucial, obviously. And as that work begins, investigators take a walk to a house just up the road, north of the intersection of 90th Street West and County Road 46. They bang on the door. One of Clifton's neighbors answers. After asking if he might have any information, the neighbor says he thinks he saw something interesting the previous night. Somewhere near 4 a.m., the neighbor explains, a pair of headlights lit up his bedroom and actually woke him out of a dead sleep. Investigators walk over and take a look out his bedroom window and realize they can see the area where the body was discovered, which they estimate to be about 200 yards away from the window. I own a storage building out there on 90th Street, the neighbor explains, just southeast of where the body was found, and have a lot of problems with theft. He further adds how the headlights startled him, and knowing thieves like to poach from his shed, he made a point of looking out the window to see what was going on. I didn't notice what type of vehicle it was, he says, but it had a loud exhaust. They took off driving westbound on 90th Street, then turned southbound on Rice County Road 46 toward the town of Faribault. On a surface level, this information doesn't seem like much, but as an investigator, this early into a case, you just never know what will help you out down the road. Let's say you get a suspect and you ask him to start his vehicle and the exhaust has a hole in it and it's loud. You could be onto something. So anything, no matter how insignificant it may seem, can break a homicide investigation wide open. After processing the scene, the woman's body is taken to the medical examiner's office as a teletype is sent out to area law enforcement with details about her to see if they can make a quick identification. She does have several distinguishing tattoos, so that is going to definitely help. The next day, investigators receive a call from the Minneapolis Police Homicide Unit Sergeant, Bruce Falcons. Based on the physical description and location and description of her tattoos, Falcons says, we think it might be a woman named Laura Lynn DeMueles. Laura is 33. She grew up in southern Minneapolis. One of her sisters describes Laura as a happy, bubbly young girl who at some point in her life fell into the abyss of addiction. With addiction comes other problems, legally and personal. But Laura was constantly trying to improve her life and pull herself out of what can be an endless battle you seem to never win. Laura has fairly straight, dirty blonde hair and lots of it. Greenish blue eyes, she liked to pull her hair back and display her beautiful face. She and her sister, Sheila, were inseparable as kids and teens, and even later, when Laura began to get into trouble and would at times disappear entangled in her addiction. And look, I say this whenever I do one of these cases. It doesn't matter what a crime victim did, the choices they made, or the problems they had. Laura didn't grow up with the dream of becoming an addict. It just happened. It didn't take away from the beauty inside of her or the dreams she had, which is one reason why Sheila, Laura's sister, would never give up on a sibling she loved so much. Rice County sheriffs begin working with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA for short, along with the Minneapolis Police Department to confirm Laura's identity so they can begin to find out who had beaten and strangled Laura to death before tossing her body in a ditch as if she was some sort of animal they had struck with their vehicle. And I also want to say that most cops getting involved in these cases perhaps push a little harder, knowing that a piece of garbage that preys on vulnerable women, those most in need of empathy and love, is an insecure coward and needs to be brought to justice before he does it again. This type of scum is the worst. A weak man, without a doubt struggling to meet even the basic requirements for being human, beating a woman half his size and then tossing her away as if her life did not matter. There's a drive inside certain investigators setting out to hunt this sort of trash. You become almost obsessed with wanting to scrape the bastard off the bottom layer of your shoe and put him away. It's those types of detectives we need out there. They don't judge. They don't make decisions based on their personal beliefs. They see murder victims as, well, victims. Investigators here learn pretty quickly that there is a good chance they will have DNA from the killer in this case, which can be a big win right out of the gate. The medical examiner is able to obtain numerous samples of bodily fluids, fingernail scrapings, hairs, and even some debris found on Laura's badly beaten body. And they discover right away none of it belongs at the scene or is connected to Laura. With a sense of hope and excitement, they submit all of that evidence for testing and comparison to known offenders in all of the available databases. They also begin to look at other murders similar in MO within the general region to see if Laura's case is possibly part of a pattern, which would mean they have a serial killer on the loose. The Rice County Sheriff's Office even offers a reward for information. After a few weeks go by, and all three agencies, working together, come up with nothing. Not a single positive lead or hit from the DNA. Not a tip that means much of anything. There are no other cases they can find matching Laura's. Excitement turns to frustration. They seem to be at a dead end, wondering where to take the case next. It's annoying as hell for investigators out there looking to put a savage killer away. They know he's made mistakes. They have his DNA, but they just cannot seem to catch that one break and identify him. Those weeks, sadly, turn into years before, out of the blue, something surprising happens, which I will get to right after we take our first break. Just a quick reminder here. Season 5 of my investigative podcast with iHeartMedia, Paper Ghosts, is out this week. The Texas Teen Murders. Get it on whatever platform you use to listen to your favorite shows, Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio app, or anywhere else. And please leave a review of Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps on Apple Podcasts and hit the follow button so you don't miss an episode. I appreciate your support and continued interest in all of my work. It's quite humbling, and I am very grateful for it. We'll be right back with more Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps in one moment. When you have a cold case that doesn't seem to be showing any signs of thawing out, as an investigator, you can only do so much. I cannot stress this enough. And it's one of those disheartening and irritating dilemmas cold case investigators face all the time. I have often been in the middle, the messenger, trying to explain to victims' families that police are doing all they can, and sometimes you just have to wait it out. On the other hand, there I am trying to prod cold case investigators to share what they can with me to keep the families from losing it. I've been screamed at by families and accused of losing interest in cases, giving up, and other things I have zero control over. I try to take it on the chin. I try to understand they are hurt. They are frustrated, irritated, sad, grieving, and truly believe law enforcement has given up when I know that is just not the case at all. In this work, patience is sometimes one of the only tools you have left in your cold case toolbox. You need to wait it out and hope for that break. Allow technology to catch up with your killer, or maybe that call comes in and gives you that one piece of the puzzle tying everything together. Of course, law enforcement cannot share everything they are doing or the evidence they have with just anyone, especially the families. So that silence only adds to the anger and frustration victims' families feel. I get it. Laura's sister Sheila doesn't wait around for something to happen. She puts up a billboard near the spot where Laura's body was found, asking for tips or information about her sister's murder. She even hits the road at times, handing out flyers, posting them on telephone poles and in windows of local businesses. Somebody has to know something. That's the idea. Maybe someone saw something. She knocks on doors, asks anyone she can if they have any information. Still, nothing comes of it. But then something happens, and all that anger and frustration is suddenly part of the past. It takes 2.5 years, but on January 8th, 2008, a Rice County investigator receives a call from the Minnesota BCA lab with good news regarding Laura's brutal murder. A sample of DNA taken from Laura's body, which had gone up until then unidentified, recently had a matching hit during what was a routine comparison made of the profile within the state's DNA database, a file containing samples and profiles of convicted felons in Minnesota. So, in other words, Laura's killer had been arrested recently for a felony, and his DNA, as a routine matter, was placed into the system, and the computer, doing its routine round of searches, spit out a match to a prior major crime: Laura's murder. It was Laura's left-hand fingernail clipping providing the match. So she had likely scratched the guy during the course of her murder, inadvertently or purposely lodging his DNA underneath her fingernail. As it turned out, Laura helped identify her killer. When they compare the profiles between that of the recent hit and what they collected from underneath Laura's fingernail, it's a near identical match. The investigator calls Laura's sister Sheila, who had been Laura's loudest and most committed advocate throughout it all. Sheila, incidentally, it needs to be noted, later says that the investigators working her sister's case showed nothing but compassion and empathy. Sheila and this investigator had many disappointing calls over the years, but not today. "We got him, Sheila," the investigator tells her over the phone. That's the stuff that gives me goosebumps, honestly. Major victories within a tragedy, compounded by so much time not knowing, then suddenly, bang, they have the dude. I'm often asked, how do you cope after 25 years of true crime and working with this stuff every day? It's those moments, the victories for families. That is very sustaining. That is the payoff. The suspect in Laura's murder was doing time for a felony DUI conviction back in December 2007, the crime that produced his DNA and inserted it into the system. I mean, look, when you drill down into most murder suspects, what you find are some of the stupidest people on the planet who probably struggle to tie their damn shoes on most mornings. But for whatever reason, they committed a murder and so far have been lucky in getting away with it. Yet they will almost always become their own worst enemy. And luck doesn't last forever. What I mean by that in this case is, this suspect didn't even have the common sense to move out of the state or at least not get caught for a DUI in state, knowing that he'd murdered someone. Has he not watched one freaking episode of Forensic Files or CSI? The shows are on TV 24/7 today. Has he not seen one true crime show? He's a criminal, after all. You'd think he'd at least know not to drive drunk or at least do it out of state, which he'd still run a DNA profile risk, but that is a much larger pool with a much larger database. And I'm not complaining here, obviously. Just pointing out how stupid most killers generally are. If you lack common sense and you decide to kill someone, expect to be caught. Even if you have common sense and you think you've crossed every T and dotted every I, expect to be caught. The bottom line is that you will not, 99 times out of 100, get away with murder these days. Every scientific and technological gear is working against you. Those murders we see unsolved, if you take a close look at them, you will see anomalies stifling progress. Generally, all of which are mistakes from the past. But today, you will be caught. When they take a look at this suspect and begin to build out a timeline and his whereabouts, everything begins to fall into place. And you do a timeline because it takes more than DNA to get your conviction. You need to build a multi-layered case and show juries everything, often spoon-feeding it to them like infants. One of your goals, or maybe hopes rather, after obtaining that DNA match, is to present it all to your suspect and allow him the opportunity to admit to everything. Save everyone the pain and wasted time of a trial, then cut a deal everyone can live with. With their chief suspect in jail already on a separate charge, investigators look at where he was working at the time of Laura's murder. Turns out he was employed by a temp service, and so they head out to interview coworkers and his boss. He was a dependable employee, always showed up for work, except on that day after Laura's body was found. And when his boss called him, the suspect said he'd found another job and wouldn't be back. But the following day, after taking that day off and saying he'd quit, there he was back at the same job. So he took one day off, which just happened to be the day after Laura was murdered. Armed with that matching DNA and additional evidence, investigators take a ride over to the prison to see if he wants to have a chat. To their surprise, he says, "Sure, sit down." Laura's sister Sheila had been waiting for an arrest, for justice, every single day throughout those years that passed, even when it seemed Laura's case would fade into the oblivion of stacks of cold cases, which seemed to be stalled. Throughout that time, searching for clues and information in her sister's murder, it occurred to Sheila that she had found her calling in life. With so many victims' families waiting and wondering, hoping for answers, same as Sheila and hers, what could she do to help? How could she make a difference? I think the answer Sheila comes up with will surprise you and at the same time make you, as it did me, envious of her. I'll get to that and the conclusion of the case after one more short break. You are listening to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. Laura DeMueles was the mother of 2 children and sibling to 6 brothers and sisters. She had problems, as we have mentioned. And at the time of her murder, Laura was trying her best to overcome all of them. She didn't always make the right decisions, but then who among us does, I would ask? What Laura did and the problems she faced does not define who she was or make her murder any less tragic or encompassing on her family and friends. The suspect's name is Antonio Medina, a 34-year-old creepy bastard who had been in and out of trouble throughout his adult life and had never really amounted to much of anything. The guy gave 0 back to society. We call that a loser, a waste of space. After sitting down with Medina and reading him his rights, Medina says he is willing to admit to murdering Laura, as if he had a choice with his DNA under her fingernails. He says he was driving down the road that night, and he picked up a man he described as an unknown black male who was walking. They had a little chat. The dude had some dope, which they then started snorting. They also picked up some booze and had a little party, getting entirely wasted, Medina explains, while driving around. What could possibly go wrong, right? The other guy, Medina says, sees a woman walking at one point and beckons Medina to stop and pick her up. As they drove, Medina says the woman, Laura, kicked the black dude out of the truck. He did not go into detail whether she did this literally or she insisted that Medina pull over and drop the dude off somewhere. In any event, Medina and Laura then took off, and according to Medina, in his words, she began to freak out and they started arguing. So, of course, this gave Medina the justification he needed to kill her. I mean, why not just kick her out of the vehicle and take off? Just leave her on the road somewhere where she was walking. They always do this. They always try to justify what they've done. Right away, when I hear this type of half-assed confession, and I know that most of it is designed to minimize the suspect's role, but in the scope of the law, he is at least admitting to the murder. That's the important thing. The way in which he dismisses his role, which they all do, doesn't matter in that respect. He admits to murdering Laura. Medina says, quote, I pinned her down and killed her inside my truck. I was on top of her and I was choking her. She scratched my face. He shows them the scars from those scratches, which provided the DNA that caught him. Laura left behind her mark on this sociopath's face forever. They take a fresh DNA sample from Medina, and when it is later tested, matches that DNA from Laura's fingernails with a 99.9% degree of certainty. They got their guy. By July 2008, Medina pleads guilty to murder and is quickly sentenced to 26 years in prison. Doesn't seem like a long enough sentence for me. But I don't make those rules there in Minnesota. If I did, I might say criminals would hate me with a fevered passion. We are just too damn lenient in this country with violent offenders and murderers for reasons I will never understand. Under state law, Medina is required, get this, to serve at least 2/3 of his sentence. Well, isn't that special, as Dana Carvey's church lady would say? The dude could be paroled in 20 years? Just doesn't seem right to me. And I have to wonder, if Medina killed a judge's daughter or a state legislature's child, if this would have been the sentence he received. Let's put that question in the suggestion box and revisit it in another episode, shall we? Laura's sister Sheila went on to earn a law enforcement degree and focused her training on digital forensics and forensic pathology. And she credits her sister for all of it. Her main focus? Cold case work. Sheila said something to reporter Rachel Hutton from the Minnesota Star-Tribune that struck me. Laura wanted me to help all of these families. And then in turn, so did Antonio. Now you might think, why Antonio? Mr. Medina's first name. But Sheila isn't referring to her sister's killer, Antonio Medina. She is referring to her and Laura's 15-year-old nephew, Antonio. In September 2015, Sheila took a call that her brother's child, her nephew Antonio, had been struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver while the child was out riding a skateboard. The guy had taken off, but they found him the next day. He said he thought he had struck an animal, so he kept going. And that story held. He walked away without any charges. By this time, Sheila was working as an independent private criminal cold case consultant. According to that same story by Rachel Hutton, Sheila's work, no surprise, centered on helping crime victims and their families navigate the criminal justice system. So, Sheila dove into her nephew Antonio's case to make sure that the man who had killed him received the justice Antonio and his family deserve. I say insert superhero theme here. I mean, come on. This is an incredible story of how one person turned a tragedy, her sister's murder, into her life's work. And here she is now, advocating for a second family member killed senselessly. When Sheila and her family sat down with law enforcement involved with investigating Antonio's death, a different agency than had investigated Laura's murder, I should say, they got this feeling that the cops were blaming Antonio, the dark color of his clothes, and him skating in the middle of the road. But Sheila found out, after digging deep into the case, that the driver had been at a bar drinking before the accident and had maybe lied about visibility and the location where he had struck the boy. The driver had also said he was not on his cell phone at the time of the crash. Given all of that, they closed the case and deemed it a tragic accident. Sheila, however, found out via a digital forensic analysis that he was on his phone and had likely been sending texts and was on a call at the moment he struck the child. Just after the crash, the driver even searched the county scanner where police dispatch calls are screened. He knew damn straight he'd hit someone, not an animal. Come on. Ultimately, the driver was arrested, only because Sheila did the work and pursued the case. He was convicted of leaving the scene of an accident. Not the charge, again, I would have liked to see, but sometimes you take a win any way you can get it. Laura's killer, Antonio Medina, is slated to be released from prison in 2025 after serving fewer than 20 years of a 26-year sentence. So this dude was able to get high, get his drunk on, pick up a woman walking along the street, and then, when he got pissed off at her, strangle her to death, then dump her body in a ditch, and then serve a sentence less than someone dealing large quantities of weed would have gotten, especially a female or minority defendant in that regard. Makes me sick to my stomach, to be honest. Antonio Medina deserves life behind bars. There should not be do-overs for murder defendants. So what he admitted it? They had him nailed. Of course he had to admit it. A killer should not be rewarded for good behavior. They've shown us who they are. I am sorry, but one murder cancels out any good they could ever do in a lifetime. That's it for this week. Be safe. Be aware. Sources for this episode include State of Minnesota and County of Rice versus Antonio Medina, 8-page summons and case report. Cold Case Consultant helps grieving families get justice. Rachel Hutton, The Minnesota Star Tribune, March 24th, 2025. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.